If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold, so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.
Now, I'm going to ask you again, how did you end up here? Because this was a platform to debate South Africans. So what did you say to get on here?
You can read the comment like I said before. I said, I know the situation because I was there when it was broken down at inception. I lived in that country at the very moment this happened, and I understand the political sphere and how that is an issue. Now, the portrayal of it and how everybody else looks at it from the outside is what you only catch on the news. What you don't catch on the ground is the frustration of most South Africans.
Are you understanding the questions you are being asked? Real quick, what did you go to university? Did you take a degree in university?
This is the highest level of colonialism I've ever seen. Colonialism is real, but I stand to be corrected because I don't know if this is American culture or European culture, whereby if someone doesn't understand what you said, or maybe they didn't understand your question, you have to ask them their qualification or their qualifications. I don't know if is this a European culture or American culture. I don't get it. But if you are smart enough, because these people, they claim that they are smart. So if he is smart, if the gentleman here is smart enough, he should understand the cultural differences. That when it comes to Africa and Western countries, there's a huge gap when it comes to cultural differences. It may not be offensive in America, that for an example, you come across someone and they didn't understand what you are saying, or they don't understand your question, then you can just, like for an example, ask them about their qualifications. But here in Africa, it's completely different. But here's the thing. The reason I don't brag with this education is because I have a different perspective when it comes to defining education. Because you have to know that the colonizer wants to waste your time. The colonizer has his own criteria. So that is why the colonizer will say, before you can work for my company, you have to go out there and spend 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and then come back. I will give you a position. I'm not against people who have the qualifications. That is why I'm like, the reason I'm not bragging about education is because I have a different perspective when it comes to education. And I respect people who rely on education, or who think like going through these institutions or having a degree is equals to education and intelligence. I respect that. But here's the thing. You should not use that as a standard for everybody when it comes to intelligence, when it comes to understanding. For an example, for me to understand you, I should have gone through all these qualifications, degrees, PhDs, and etc., just to understand you. In my view, It's colonial, because these colonizers don't even have these certificates, but they were smart enough to create the education so that we can brag to one another that I have PhD, that I have masters, that I have multiple degrees, and etc. and etc. This gentleman here from DRC Congo was expecting a conversation about xenophobia, but he needs to prove that he qualifies to speak. This is something which was supposed to have been done by the team of the host to see if the gentleman is qualified to speak. But you have to know something when it comes to the bullies. They will always try to find a victim. And the moment they have found someone whom they believe is their victim, they are ready to devour. They are ready to devour. They are ready to undermine because they feel like they are superior. This is the mind of the colonizer, because the colonizer feels like they are superior, even if you may have same qualifications with the colonizer, but the colonizer will still think that they are superior. For an example, just because we are Africans from Africa, many people, like the host here, they believe that we are inferior. They believe that we are slow. They believe that we cannot think. They believe that we don't understand anything. So that is why we have to prove them with qualifications. It's like, for an example, you attend a family gathering and they start acting smart. They ask each other about qualifications and etc. so that they can just exclude you in the conversation because they believe that you are not smart enough to partake in that particular conversation because they are smart. They start asking you weird questions, useless questions. This is what is happening here. This is what is happening here. So this gentleman here is not about Africans. He has just found a topic to talk about. He's not about like protecting the Nigerians, protecting the non-citizens here in South Africa. He's not about that. He's about, like, for an example, the content to talk about whatever he wants to talk about because he's undermining the very same people he's defending. In other words, it doesn't mean if I'm against your ideas or I don't agree with you, I have to belittle you. Doesn't mean I have to underestimate you. It doesn't mean I have to prove that I'm wealthier than you. I have more assets. I have more capacity. I have power. I have strength. I have everything. I don't know if this is Western culture but when it comes to us here in Africa, it's just a bit offensive. So that is why I'm like, if you are smart, really smart, you have to know the cultural differences that, okay, if I'm going to speak to someone from Brazil, this is how I should behave. If I'm going to speak to someone from Ghana, this is how I should behave. But the very same people who are smart, who are highly educated, who are wealthy, in other words, they have all time to think about these things, but they are still slow. They are slow as well. Because if you have money, if you have like time, if you are wealthy, you must have time to know about these things. But no, they don't. They are just willing to devour and they pick and choose their victims. Why? Because they want to devour. They want to prove everybody else that they are right. Because the most important thing that you need to understand here in South Africa, this thing of xenophobia is just a lie. Is just a lie. Because you have to understand, it doesn't mean all the time we have to blame the mainstream media. But what I know is that mainstream media doesn't care about the truth. They only care about the profit. They only care about the profit. And this is what is happening with many people on the internet. They want to go with the stories that will bring audience to their attention. This is what they want. When it comes to mainstream media doesn't care about positivity, doesn't care about the truth. Even if they know that this is the truth, they'll always focus on negativity. For what? For profit. Why? Because at the end of the day, they have to make enough revenue so that they can pay everybody else. So that at the end of the day, they can have profit. This is what mainstream media is all about. So they've spread all this propaganda, these false news that xenophobia exists. Xenophobia doesn't exist. The problem here of South Africa is that we have a corruption by politicians, by government officials. We have a problem here of people who are not documented. In other words, when it comes to security, we have a problem. In other words, every day we have people who are getting kidnapped. We have a problem of trafficking here. And when we trace this down, people who are being used in the process are people who are not documented. Why? Because you cannot trace their fingerprints. You cannot trace anything about them. So when it comes to this thing of not documenting people, is business here in South Africa. There are people who are benefiting. So right now, those who are protesting are fighting against the system. But as our brother said here, that this is a frustration. In other words, frustration is like a bomb. Frustration is like tornado. Frustration is something else. It's like water. You cannot control it when it happens. South Africans are good people. They know how to live with other people, since Mandela and others have convinced us. But right now, we have a problem whereby the companies, private companies, are corrupt. Government institutions are corrupt. Government departments are corrupt. Government officials are corrupt. And we have other people who are taking advantage of the situation, who are calling South Africans lazy. And in our community, in our communities, they are involved in crime. It doesn't mean it's only them who are involved in crime. But the statistics tells us when it comes to selling powder, who is selling powder, who is distributing powder. And we know that the colonizer is still in charge of the manufacturing of the powder. But the very same people are still are also being used. In other words, we have to tell the truth. So these people who call themselves Pan-Africanists, and these people who act as if they love Africans, when in reality they are not, they will come here and act as if they are in defense of other black people. You get what I'm saying? Because mainstream media has lied to everybody else. And even if you try to explain to these people to say, you know what, let us address these issues. Let us like address the source of the problem or the core of the problem. They don't want to hear that. Why? It's because they have an agenda. They themselves have an agenda. Why? Because the focus is on popular stories. That as long as they can, like, for an example, do all these videos and they become popular, just like mainstream media. There are many positive things that are happening in South Africa, but mainstream media doesn't want to talk about those things. So that is why now we have such problems. That is why we have such problems. Everybody is talking about this issue, but it's only few people who want to use or apply their common sense, to apply logic in order to find the source of the problem. Because the source of the problem here is corruption and all the things that I've just mentioned right now. And right now, the more these things increases, the more pressure increases, the more frustration increases, then you cannot control the consequences. You cannot control the results of that pressure. Yes, some of these people, they expect the pressure to go to the colonizers. They expect the pressure to go to the politicians. They expect the pressure to go to go somewhere else. But you cannot control their pressure. And South Africans are not afraid of anyone. It's just the matter of context. If we are fighting against the government, we will take our fight to the government. If we fight against something else, we'll take our fight to that particular institution or to those people. But right now, when it comes to this one, this is a long frustration. In other words, it has been there for a long time. Why? Because people are getting kidnapped, and these people from other countries, they are taking control of our economy, even our small economies in our small towns. They own properties and they choose who should, for an example, be allowed to occupy those properties or those commercial properties. For an example, if I have to negotiate with someone who is the owner of the property and that particular person is not a South African, the price will always go high because I'm a South African. But if somebody else from another country comes, then they will just reduce the rent. This is what is happening. And it becomes difficult for South Africans to get into business. Then now, someone might say, we are afraid of the competition. No, it's not about the competition. It's about the law. What does the law say? The law is against all those things. Even when it comes to hiring, even when it comes to running a small business, who should run a small business? So that is why our focus is the law. So that is why I said the government institutions and government officials are corrupt, because they are the ones who are supposed to be implementing these laws. It doesn't mean we have to make a proposal for these laws to be implemented, but these laws are already there. These laws are already there. It's just that these officials, they need to make sure that these laws are fulfilled. And here is the thing. People can see that the government is corrupt. But the problem is that if the number of people from outside are now bragging daily that here I'm in South Africa and I don't even have papers, the police can't do anything. We meet people daily who are like that. And the more the number of people like that is increasing, then it creates frustration to the people of South Africa. And they react as if they hate their own brothers and sisters. Because daily, you'll find someone from another country. When you are like, okay, my brother, how are you? In the midst of the conversation, they start telling you that they don't even have papers. And they are, even when they talk, you can tell that they are proud of that. So what if that person can come at night and do something to you and do something to your family? And this is what is happening. Children are getting lost. And most of them are not even found. So that is why we're like, we have to clean the country. I'm not condoning people to be beaten. But what I know is that sometimes you will beg people to say, guys, comply, comply, comply. But at the end of the day, when people realize that these people don't even care, these people are making fun of us, they call us lazy and etc., then that anger will come out of their hearts. And you cannot control it. The very same thing that is happening here in South Africa, if you use logic, it can happen everywhere. It can even happen in Lesotho. It can happen at Eswatini, in Namibia, in these small countries. It can happen. It can even happen in Nigeria. Even in the United States of America, it can happen. But the problem is that we have people asking us about qualifications. We don't qualify to talk about these matters happening in our own country. We don't qualify to talk about these matters because we don't have qualifications, because we don't have PhDs. Now you have to explain. Now you have to explain because you have to prove. You have to prove that your intelligence is at the level of their own measure. How they measure intelligence, how they measure, like for an example, good education, or someone who in other words, someone who is better when it comes to understanding, someone who is better when it comes to analyzing something. So you have to meet that particular criteria, or you have to meet that particular standard. So if this is a culture, it's not a good culture to us. So that is why if I'll have an opportunity to communicate with someone from another country, or if I get the time to communicate with someone from that country, I have to understand their culture. I should not, like, for an example, communicate with them as if I'm communicating with my neighbor, or I'm talking to my neighbor who is used to our communication style. But here's the thing. If you brag like this, everybody gets happy. Everybody is excited.
Yes, I did. University of Johannesburg.
Fantastic. What degree did you earn?
Multimedia degree.
Multimedia. What does that teach you to do?
It teaches you to create.
You see, now he has to explain, to prove that he's at that level. That's a colonial mind. That's a colonial behavior. So that is why the colonizer will say to you, before you can work at my company, I need a 7-year degree. I need a 5-year degree. I need a 4-year degree. I need a diploma from you. This is the qualification that I need before you can work for my company. You have to prove. Every time, this is so painful when it comes to Africans. You have to prove, because most of these people, even when they look like you, because they grew up in Europe, because they grew up in these other countries. Every time you come across them, you have to prove that you are civilized. Why? Because in their minds, they think that you grew up in a jungle, you are uncivilized, you play with monkeys. In other words, you play with animals in a jungle, and you cannot, like for an example, build a conversation. Why? Because you are uncivilized, you are scary. In other words, this is what they believe. This is what they believe. And it's bad, because this is the education that was created. And that is why I'm like, this is colonialism to the core. What does wealth and money and all these things got to do with like having a conversation about what is happening in South Africa and your perspective about xenophobia, whether it's xenophobia or it's not xenophobia? Our people here are highly frustrated. They are very frustrated. And it's not only about, like, for an example, those undocumented people from, like, black people from other countries who are not documented. In other words, it also includes everybody else. Everybody else, even from Pakistan, from all these other countries. But people will come here and say, no, you are scared of, you are scared of this group of people. But if you're smart enough, you have to understand that battles will always differ based on context. You have to understand the core of the problem. The core is not like, I hate you because you look like me and I'm colonized. That's not the problem. The problem is that you are here undocumented. You are here undocumented, and you call me lazy, and you keep on calling me lazy every day, and you are also involved in crime, and you are also bragging that your job is to sell this powder. You are bragging about that. In other words, you are bragging about selling fake stuff. You are bragging about that. Obvious, people will be frustrated. And even when it comes to jobs, don't listen to these politicians who are lying to you, because we have to understand that according to the law, these jobs, in other words, these jobs that doesn't require, like for an example, a complicated skill or a special skill, should be occupied by South Africans. Should be occupied by the South Africans. But what is happening right now? The very same companies are corrupt. They are taking advantage of the Labor Department. And now they are working with the very same people we call our brothers and sisters. In other words, their boss will be like, I need more labor. Can you call somebody you know from your country? And this is what they do. They'll do the very same. They'll do the very same thing until the entire company is occupied by people from outside. This is what is happening. This is the truth, because these owners, owners of these companies, they are taking advantage. So it means if people are against South Africans and they are like, you hate your brothers and sisters, you are colonized, but the very same people are colonized. Why can't you ask your boss? Why don't you hire these people? Why do you keep on retrenching South Africans? They are also my brothers and sisters. They are not doing that. Then at the end of the day, who is benefiting? Who is benefiting? Is them and the colonizer or the owners of these companies. So if people are like, we are scared of the colonizers, everybody is scared of the colonizers, and everybody is serving the colonizers. Because People don't like the truth. If, in other words, the very same that is happening in South Africa, it can happen in Kenya. It can happen even in Nigeria. It can happen also in Zimbabwe. It can happen anywhere. If all of us here in South Africa, for an example, as South Africa right now is struggling with unemployment, if we can just go, if we can just go to South Korea or North Korea, what do you think will happen there in the future? If thousands and thousands of us are moving there daily, what do you think will happen in South Korea, in North Korea? Frustration will rise amongst the Koreans. If the very same thing is happening in Nigeria, frustration will rise amongst Nigerians. But we have to understand that frustration doesn't rise amongst those who are wealthy, who are protected. But if you are living in the areas that are not secure, and every time there's kidnapping, that kidnapping is associated with someone who is not documented, and that person cannot be found, your child cannot be found, and the rate of human trafficking keeps on increasing, what will you do? What will you do? If these people here in Durban are taking it to the streets, you should never, like for an example, underestimate what they are doing. Maybe you can have a different perspective. Maybe you can have a different kind of solution when it comes to this. But you have to understand that they are frustrated. So as they are frustrated, if the government was a good government, was supposed to say, you know what, this is enough, or enough is enough. Let me solve this. Let me go straight to the Department of Home Affairs. Let me ask questions. Let me go to Security Department. Let me ask questions. But they are not doing so. So that is why our people will always be frustrated. Even if this situation can just calm down now, but it doesn't mean the frustration is gone. The frustration is not gone. The frustration is still there. It's still there. These people, they are waiting for the government which they put in power, or these politicians, to solve the problem. But instead of these politicians to solve the problem, they are not interested. They are not interested. They are slow. They are corrupt. They don't care. Then it means if leadership doesn't care, people will take matters into their own hands, like it or not. Like it or not. So that is why a society must have a leader, must have someone whom they can trust to solve their problems on their behalf. They need such a person. But if that person is manipulated, if that person doesn't care, then people will take matters into their own hands without consulting their leader. In other words, they will overpower their own leader. This is what is happening. And they're like, now we are scared. Everybody's scared. Everybody's scared because there's no economy in this world that is under the leadership of black people or is majority run, administered, controlled by black people in this planet. Not even one country. Everybody's scared. Everybody is scared.
Graphics, to create video, to create the kind of space that you live in.
What space?
Or do your business in. Or do your business in. Let's just do that. I create podcast sets, I create videos, I create photo content and everything. So
okay. So you create.
That's what the degree does teach you.
Okay. So the degree teaches you to create photo video content to set up podcasts and things of the like. Is that correct?
No, it teaches you art as a whole in a digital world. So multimedia, it's in the word multimedia.
Interesting. You see, because what's perplexing me is that you took a degree in multimedia, yet you're on a podcast. You don't have proper sound equipment. You're sitting in your car. So I find this to be strange because you said
Even when you tried to humble yourself and answer the question or explain yourself, the bully is not satisfied. The bully will always try to find a way to underestimate you, to belittle you, to find something wrong about you. Why? Because they believe that in South Africa or in Africa, there's no intelligence. People are uncivilized. That is why there will never be a connection between Africans in the diaspora and Africans here in Africa. There will never be a connection, or it's going to be difficult to bridge the gap. Why? Because others think that they are superior than others. And that's the problem. And that's the problem. And majority of these people, when they come to South Africa, they visit South Africa, they want to go to Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban, or Cape Town. Then afterwards, they start mocking black people that they don't see black people in those areas. You have to understand that countries like South Africa, they are still under colonialism. 1994 was a scam. This country is still under the control of the colonizers. So if you want to connect with the people, you need to humble yourself and come to where the people are staying and understand their condition. Don't mock their condition. Don't mock what they are going through. So in other words, what should come in your mind is to say, how can I use my resources? Because you are wealthy. Use your resources to help these people, to say, what can we do? In other words, if these people from other countries, they have a system of buying properties so that they can control the economy, so that they can choose who should rent that particular property, then if you are a Pan-Africanist or you love Africans, you should do the same thing and come and invest, buy properties, and then empower these South Africans who are excluded. This is what is needed, man. This is what is needed. But the problem is that many people here on social media, mainstream media, they're just good when it comes to analysis and everything. They don't want to come to the ground so that they can face the challenges, so that they can see what people are going through, so that they can come with possible solutions. Everybody wants to talk. And there are no solutions. This is what we are going through right now. So if you are being interviewed by someone like this, you should not expect the person to respect you. You should not expect that at all. Why? Because colonialism is real, man. These people, they think they are intelligent. Majority of them, they think they are intelligent. They are smart. They are more smart than everybody. If you are smart, you have to understand that there's a cultural difference. There's a language barrier. Again, even when it comes to communication, most of these people, they speak like one language or maybe two languages. But here in Africa, we speak multiple languages. We speak multiple languages. For an example now, if a South African will have a conversation with a native speaker of English, and he or she is not a native speaker from South Africa, what do we expect? Obvious, the communication might be a bit slow. Why? Because this other person is not a native speaker of English. So now, just because you are a native speaker of English, in other words, you can communicate effectively, you think everybody is slow. You think everybody is stupid. You think this is the mindset of the colonizer. And this is what we are still suffering from here in Africa. Because people want to be like Western people. They want to be like Western people. And that's not cool at all. That's not cool at all. So sometimes it's better to be undermined. Sometimes it's better to be undermined by people from other races than to be undermined by someone whom you may consider your own brother.
Said that.
I'm on
right
the
now,
go.
We're kind of
I'm on the
engaging.
go. I'm on the go. Okay, Marquette. Here's one thing you don't get. Here's one thing you don't get. You asked for me to have proper microphone and access to a camera. You didn't say you want someone to be on something that is a proper studio setup, because I could have done that too. Now, can we get to the issue at hand? You're not going to bait me like you do most of the issues.
First, we want to qualify you. First, we want to qualify you.
I'm qualified to have the conversation. You're an American.
Calm down,
right?
Calm down.
You're an American,
calm
right?
Down. They
Marquette,
say that you guys have no impulse control. They say that the Africans get very emotional.
Are you South
start
African?
Yelling. So calm down. Just calm down. Relax yourself. Thank you.
Oh.
And a good way to think about how you should interact with me like I'm a white South African.
No, you're not.
That's the way you should interact.
By South
with me,
African
okay?
definition, you're colored.
Colonization to the core. This is colonization to the core, because they believe that everybody is scared. Sometimes we are being respectful. For an example, when it comes to me, I respect people. I try by all means to engage with people respectfully, so irregardless of where you come from, even when we disagree. But I treat people equally, even if you are white. No matter, you cannot speak nonsense to me. I just, like, for an example, ignore you just like that. But when it comes to communication, our communication can go friendly, because we have to respect one another. But it doesn't mean we are scared. But the reason the host is speaking like this is to prove to us that we are scared, or why are we not challenging a certain group of people? Why? Because they want to prove, they want to push this thing that xenophobia is real in South Africa. But I just want to tell you that these people, all of them, are colonized. Majority of these people are colonized, because money can't help you to get rid of colonialism in your mind. If you want to remove colonialism from your mind, it's free of charge. But what makes it difficult is that we think like education, PhDs, we think that wealth, material resources makes us smart. This is a problem. So that is why now we want to push something that is not even there, because they want to make sure that we have to divert their attention, we have to divert the focus to something else. Even now, we are still dealing with this thing of land. Still dealing with this thing of land. We're still dealing with a lot of things. But on top of that, we have another problem. we have another problem. So these people, majority of them, are running from their countries because their countries are under colonialism and their leaders are scared of the colonizer. At the end of the day, everybody is scared.
If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.